Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
President-elect Joe Biden is making another historic pick for his brand new cabinet. He is nominating retired Army General Lloyd Austin to be his defense secretary. If confirmed, Austin will be the first African American to lead the Pentagon and the country's 1.3 million troops. Since Austin retired from the military just 4 years ago, he'll require a waiver from Congress to serve as the Secretary of Defense. It's an exception that's been made only twice in the last 70 years. Joining us, NBC News' Jeff Bennett, live in Wilmington, Delaware, and retired four-star U.S. Army General Barry McCaffrey, who is now, lucky for us, an MSNBC military analyst. He's also a former member of the National Security Council. General McCaffrey, I start with you. What do you know about who, if confirmed, the country's next Secretary of Defense?
Look, I watched President-elect Biden roll out a series of senior officials of government and been thrilled with them. This may be his best of all. I've watched Lloyd Austin for 20 years. He has incredible experience. He is loved and admired by the armed forces and our international allies. He's a very low-key person of tremendous integrity. Very well educated. He understands the budget in the Pentagon and how the Pentagon works. A lot of joint command time. I think it's a remarkable appointment and will be well received by the national security arena.
General McCaffrey, I want to read you something that Joe Biden wrote about his new nominee. And I want you to talk about the importance of the relationship between a commander-in-chief and the person who runs the Pentagon for us after I read this. This is from President-elect Biden. Why I chose Lloyd Austin as Secretary of Defense. In his more than 40 years in the United States Army, Austin met every challenge with extraordinary skill and profound personal decency. He is a true and tested soldier and leader. I've spent countless hours with him in the field and in the White House Situation Room. I've sought his advice, seen his command, and admired his calm and his character. He is the definition of a patriot. And I guess my question is, it's a good reminder that as we kind of game out who's up and who's down in terms of these appointments, it's all about the incoming president's rapport and relationship with the certain candidates. And it's clear that this is who he wants in this job, isn't it?
Oh, no question. Look, I think the other thing, there's been this incredible chaos in government at every level, to include the national security process, for 4 years. It's been abysmal. Lloyd Austin is so easy to get along with. I've been bombarded with thousands of texts and tweets of people that work for General Austin over the years. So part of his contribution to the president-elect is to help end the chaos inside the Beltway. He knows everything about national security issues. He has a global grasp of the problem, but he's also got no ego and a soft-spoken voice.
Jeff Bennett, that's the good news, I guess, if you're the president-elect. Here's some of the potential landmines. There's already some resistance to this appointment. Let me read you something, a quote from Democratic Senator Jack Reed. He's the ranking member of Senate Armed Services, and this is about this waiver that's required if you've not been out of the military for 7 years. He says this, quote, waiving the law should happen no more than once in a generation, according to Senator Jack Reed, a West Point graduate and former Army Ranger. He said that when retired General Jim Mattis was confirmed as Pentagon chief in 2017, adding, quote, therefore, I will not support a waiver for future nominees. In the New York Times, Jim Golby, a former Pentagon and White House staffer, says this, the Pentagon needs to reestablish traditional national security processes and return to a sense of normalcy. After 4 years of relative, if erratic, autonomy under Mr. Trump, military leaders may chafe when civilian national security leaders ask to check their homework. To some extent, that's healthy. Too much friction can stop or slow process. Certain levels necessary. And the conclusion there is General Lloyd Austin, a recently retired general, should not be Secretary of Defense. What does the transition team think about the odds for getting him through?
Well, Nicole, I'll put it this way. That is precisely why the president-elect wrote that op-ed that the Atlantic published just the last hour. Joe Biden has written no such op-ed for any other cabinet selection. And I think the key graph in that entire piece that he wrote was this. I hope that Congress will grant a waiver to Secretary-designate Austin, just as Congress did for Jim Mattis. Given the immense and urgent threats and challenges our nation faces, he should be confirmed swiftly, Biden writes. So back in 2017, there were actually 17 Senate Democrats who voted against the waiver that Jim Mattis needed to serve as Donald Trump's defense secretary, and the Biden transition team is keenly aware of that. So that op-ed was, I think, choreographed, designed to blunt that criticism. It was also designed to blunt the criticism, I guess disappointment is a better word, among the supporters of Michelle Flournoy. If people don't know who she is a Pentagon veteran who was widely assumed to be defense secretary for Hillary Clinton back in 2016 had Hillary Clinton won. And she was an early contender, a top contender to be Joe Biden's defense chief. And so there are some folks, Democrats in the sort of national security community who are disappointed, even as they, welcome the fact that Joe Biden has selected General Austin to serve as his defense secretary. There is a bit of a disappointment that Michelle Flournoy did not emerge as the top choice.
It is Wednesday, the 9th of December of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Hey, I really think that Beckett is a good Christmas movie. Right up there with the Saw movies that are pretty much a tradition in, our family. Not my mom. She has no idea what the Saw movies are. But she watches the next best thing, and that's the Hallmark movies. Man, talk about godless murders during a holiday. Eek. Yeah, Hallmark movies have really changed over the years. Odd, isn't it? Well, enough of that. Hey, looks like Trump's losing again, which means that Biden, this is Groundhog Day. Every morning we get up and Biden wins the election again. Boy, I can't wait till he takes office. Because then every day we get to wake up and he takes office again. It'll be great. Okay. Did you hear? Vlad is being lobbied by Russia media and others to grant asylum to Trump, and I probably believe his family and some other hangers-on. Grant them asylum in Moscow to put them out of reach of, the long arm of the law in America. And I would think that if Trump was smart, which I know he's not, but, let's just, for argument's sake, decides that maybe that might be the smart thing to do, well, he can still grift from Moscow. I'm sure Vlad will want him to, because you got to be an earner. You know, you got to kick it up to the Don, and I'm not talking about Trump. You know, Trump's got a boss, and his name's Vlad. And Vlad wants his take. He wants his cut. He wants his taste. He wants to dip his beak. And I'm pretty sure that Trump will be able to grift the maggots here in America and maybe elsewhere in the world from his digs in Moscow. Or maybe it'll be a dacha right outside Moscow. Maybe. But, yeah, he may take up that offer. We've joked about it, and now looks like it's being put in place. Yep. And good riddance, too. I think that if given the choice between convicting Trump, you know, and all that entails, to him just leaving to escape any kind of investigation, I think a lot of people would say, just go. Just go. All right. Well, there's a lot more happening in the world, too. DeSantis? What's up with that guy? Well, we know exactly what's up with that guy. So he sends his Gestapo. I don't know what else to call it. They're armed. Meant to terrorize the data scientists that had been let go in the summer for, well, doing data science. Apparently, DeSantis thinks that data science is the work of the devil and got to get rid of it because there is a separation between science and state now. And DeSantis is determined to make sure that the laws are faithfully enforced. So he sent the Gestapo in to terrorize this data scientist and her family. 2-year-old toddler in the arms of dad with the 11-year-old behind dad. And the cops, or whatever they are, the Gestapo, are pointing guns at him. And what was the great crime that she didn't even do? Put an email on blast to other people in the health department, telling them to do their jobs and tell the truth. And that was just, well, that was too far for DeSantis. Now you know how the White Rose Society members, Sophie Scholl in particular, was beheaded for merely putting up leaflets at the major university there in Germany about, you know, the horrors of Nazism. Merely putting up leaflets. We're not talking about bombing buildings. We're not talking about killing Nazi soldiers. Merely putting up a leaflet. And she was beheaded for that transgression. Now you know how a data scientist can have the Gestapo ransack her home at gunpoint, holding her kids hostage. Because, hey, DeSantis has to show who's the boss. Well, that didn't go over well, especially now that people have security cameras. The cops, I know, conveniently didn't have any body cams. And there's some question whether even the car cams were turned on. How is that possible? Well, the Gestapo does what the Gestapo does when they want to Gestapo. Let's be clear about it. These cops knew that there was a 2-year-old toddler, dad, an 11-year-old kid, and what? What is she? 5'1"? Data scientist? Yeah, big threat. Okay, well, you know, they're shooting black men in the back for carrying a Subway sandwich into their homes while SWAT is trying to arrest somebody else somewhere in the neighborhood. Hey, there's a black guy. I think that Subway sandwich looks like a gun. Yeah. So they shot him in the back right as he's going into his own home. And it turns out that he was not only licensed to carry a Subway sandwich, but also a gun. But he was black, so the laws don't apply in that situation now, does it? Because the Gestapo does what the Gestapo wants to do when they want to do it. And they Gestapo. It's fun. They think it's fun. Gunner is snoozing away, and that's his job. Because, well, we love Gunner, don't we? Hey, Gunner, you're snoozing. Okay, back to the matters at hand. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? You know the beginning part. At the top, of course. Well, I suppose some people would say it's dubious for a General McCaffrey to laud a former general taking over the defense secretary position. But I think that maybe this is exactly what we need instead of some 22-year-old right out of college who was essentially a clerk in the Trump campaign. Put them into acting Secretary of Defense. Yeah, that'll work. So, or 30-year-olds. It doesn't matter. 22 to 30. I don't care. And, I guess apparently he's got some investments in Raytheon. Well, you know what we do as Democratic members of our body politic? You know what we do? Yeah, we put those into receivership, blind trust, or get rid of them altogether and have nothing to do with it, because that's what we do. So stop complaining about it, please. On the rest of the menu, the Idaho Health Board meeting was halted last night when Ammon Bundy's armed anti-mask goons terrorized board members and their families at their homes. One board member had her 12-year-old kid alone at home when these armed goons surrounded the house and started pounding on the doors and the windows. A 12-year-old inside terrorized. Well, it's America, and people have a right, apparently, to do that, especially if you're white. A North Carolina newspaper publisher was handcuffed and ordered out of a courtroom for objecting to a lack of court access. They told him, who's boss, you're complaining about court access? Well, we're just going to deny you access altogether. Handcuff him! And cybersecurity firm FireEye says it was hacked by an unnamed nation state that just happens to write in Cyrillic. Really? After the break, we move to the chef's table, where an Iranian official said some of the usual suspects have been arrested in the killing of the top nuclear scientist last month. Yeah, the usual suspects. They always have that. And Putin signed a law allowing Russian legislation to claim precedence over any international treaty entered anywhere in the world between any other governments. Well, isn't that nice, Vlad? That is called Russia exceptionalism. I wonder where they learned that. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon site, and please do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio if you do so, as others have for quite a while now. Thank you to those of you who have been very generous, and especially to those of you who have upped your recurring contribution these last few months. That has, especially since this month is the cutoff month for getting the needed machinery. One of the workhorses is still working on Windows 7, so that gives you an indication of how old that is. But anyway, thank you to those of you who have been so generous. To those of you who would be able to, even in these times of peril, if you could afford the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink once a month and send that to us, the funds for that. I mean, we gladly drink it, a cup of espresso or an espresso-type coffee drink. But if you could send the funds to us instead, we stretch those dollars beyond compare. We are quantum mechanics in dollar stretching right on the subatomic level. It's amazing how we're able to do it. I don't know how. We're just able to. Some sort of stretching machinery within the subatomic level is being used. And we stretch those dollars, and then we pay our bills, and that allows us to fly under the radar. We found out paying your bills sometimes allows you to fly under the radar and continue resisting this fascist takeover of our democracy. How dare they? But thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty. We, all kidding aside, do take it quite seriously. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is one of the simplest ways to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, because you just go to @Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom. The foresight that came with that. Now, I was stuck with calling the show @Cookbook West because, I don't know, not knowing what the hell I was doing. Well, I think I knew a little bit about what I was doing, but a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing, as they say. So you can follow the show @Cookbook West, but you can also follow me on Twitter @Justice Putnam. Hey, I'm not going to forget it, because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Goes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on Twitter. And in a few hours, I'll be able to link that up on Facebook again until they tell me the artificial intelligence says that whatever you're doing, we're not going to allow, because artificial intelligence isn't that intelligent now, is it? Yep, it's not a human being, and there's no substitute for a human. Really, there isn't. And that's more than just this reporter's opinion. Follow, you know how to follow the show @Cookbook West, and you can also pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Gunner, you're snoring really loud. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yesterday's show was yanked off of YouTube because I included in the break part usual Nicole Sandler What's News and irregular inclusion. But because it was John Lennon's anniversary of his killing, she played, I guess, more than 18 seconds of Strawberry Fields Forever. And she pays. She pays, too. And they yank her podcast all the time off of YouTube because she played music. I don't know why they do that. But I guess I need to go in and take out Nicole's segment, or at least that part, and then podcast it on Stitcher Spreaker, and then it'll get out again on everything, and maybe just put it on iTunes, YouTube. YouTube is the one. So Nicole's been going round and round and round and round and round with YouTube for years over this. She pays top dollar to be able to use this music because she's a radio professional. All right. Anyway, you can find yesterday's podcast, Terrytown Chatter Tuesdays, in every format except for YouTube. All righty, let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We'll try to speak over Gunner's exceedingly loud snoring. Yep, there it is. Looks like Rebecca Boone from the Associated Press brings us this first offering. Idaho public health officials abruptly ended a meeting last night, Tuesday, after the Boise mayor and chief of police said intense protests. Intense. Outside the health department building, as well as outside health officials' homes, were threatening public safety. Intense protests. When white people do this, armed and terrorizing little kids at home when their parents aren't there, that's intense. Yeah, it's intense. I have another word for it. Terrorizing might be a apt term, but I guess intense is less letters than intense. The request from Boise Mayor Lauren McLean and the Boise Police Department came just a few minutes after one health board member, Ada County Commissioner Diana Lasciando, tearfully interrupted the online meeting to say she had to rush home from work to be with her son. The board had been expected to vote on a 4-county mask mandate in Idaho's most populated region. My 12-year-old is home alone right now, and there are protesters banging outside the door, she said. Another board member, family physician Dr. Ted Epperly, said protests were not under control at my house as well. Protesters went to at least 3 board members' homes, the police department in Boise said. Hundreds of protesters gathered at the Central District Health parking lot before and during the meeting. The protest at the health building was organized by a loose multi-state group called People's Rights, a group created by Ammon Bundy, the outspoken opponent of mask mandates, and I would also say a seditious secessionist. Apparently a professional because he goes over state lines to get people to, violate the law. And, of course, we all know him from gaining national attention in the so-called Patriot movement after leading armed standoffs at his father's Nevada ranch in 2014 and at a wildlife refuge in eastern Oregon in 2016. Members of an anti-vaccination group called Health Freedom Idaho also attended the protest. It wasn't immediately known if Bundy attended the protests in Boise Tuesday evening. Central District Health Director Russ Duke interrupted the meeting last night to inform board members of the mayor's request. I got a call from the mayor, and it sounded like the police, and she is requesting that we stop the meeting at this time because of the intense level of protesters in the parking lot and concern for police safety and safety staff, as well as the protesters that are at some of our board members' homes right now, Duke said. The Boise Police Department later issued a statement that said they requested the meeting to adjourn in the interest of public safety. The ever-present anonymous worker bee at this time, the Associated Press brings us this next offering here. In the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. A North Carolina newspaper publisher was handcuffed and ordered out of a courtroom yesterday, Tuesday, as he objected to a decision to block reporters from attending a plea hearing for a white woman accused of driving her pickup truck at 2 12-year-old black girls. Tom Boney Jr., publisher of the Alamance News, was delivering a document requesting a hearing on whether it is appropriate to close the court to the news media. The News and Observer of Raleigh reported. Journalists from other outlets had already been told they were not allowed inside the Alamance County Courthouse, where Judge Fred Wilkins presided over the case against the woman accused of driving her car at the girls. The week before, reporters had been kept from attending a court hearing involving the leader of a march in which police had pepper-sprayed protesters. Yesterday, Tuesday, the reporters each asked for a hearing before the judge, but were told by deputies that Wilkins had already made his decision. Boney had hand-delivered a letter to Senior Resident Superior Court Judge D. Thomas Lambeth, and Chief District Court Judge Bradley Reed Allen Jr. on Tuesday, asking that they remind other judges that courtrooms must remain open to the public despite COVID-19 safety precautions. And with that, they arrested him, put him in handcuffs, and escorted him from the building. Sandra Warren Brazy, 52 of Burlington, was charged in August with 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill. The girls had just bought snacks at a convenience store when the incident occurred. The LMS News reported that the hearing was to announce a plea agreement in which Brazy pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault with a deadly weapon. She was given 2 consecutive 60-day sentences, which were suspended, and a measly $1,000 fine. Project and Matt O'Brien of the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Prominent U.S. cybersecurity firm FireEye said yesterday, Tuesday, that foreign government hackers with world-class capabilities broke into its network and stole offensive tools it uses to probe the defenses of its thousands of customers, who include federal, state, and local governments and top global corporations. The hackers primarily sought information related to certain government customers, FireEye CEO Kevin Mandia said in a statement, without naming them. He said there was no indication they got customer information from the company's consulting or breach response businesses or threat intelligence data it collects. FireEye is a major cybersecurity player. It responded to the Sony and Equifax data breaches and helped Saudi Arabia thwart an oil industry cyber attack, and has played a key role in identifying Russia as the protagonist in numerous aggressions in the burgeoning netherworld of global digital conflict. Neither Mandia nor a FireEye spokeswoman said when the company detected the hack or who might be responsible, but many in the cybersecurity community suspect Russia. All right, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, The Life Ahead. That's the title of the new film helmed by the legendary Sophia Loren and directed by her son, Eduardo Ponte, about two outsiders coming together. In the wrong hands, trite sentimentality would await, but Loren and Ponte managed to take this theme and make a film that is intelligent, touching, and timely. Loren's Madame Rosa, a Holocaust survivor turned sex worker turned foster mother, is a complex character who maintains a sense of dignity, even when it comes to dealing with unruly charges and the pitfalls of old age. Supporting her is the young Ibrahima Guy, playing Momo, a Senegalese refugee who first meets Rosa after he attempts to steal from her. A local doctor who has been caring for Momo bribes Rosa to add him to her brood. Rosa, along with the kids and a trans woman who lives in the apartment below, form a family of sorts, reinforcing one of the movie's themes. That family can be more about the people with whom you choose to associate than about biological relations. As the audience learns more about Momo and Rosa, one thing becomes clear. Trauma has deep and lasting impacts on people and who they can trust. The fact that these two can trust anyone, much less each other, is a triumph, even though Ponte is wise enough not to wrap his story with a fairy tale ending. The performances of 86-year-old Loren and 14-year-old Guy and the rapport they generate make this one worth a watch. It's rare to see a woman Loren's age in a leading role, but this one makes clear that there was far more than beauty that made her the first woman to win the Best Actress Oscar in a non-English role. A nomination for The Life Ahead wouldn't be a stretch. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Julia Rosen. Every year, salmon come home to Alaska's frigid rivers to mate, lay their eggs, and die. The state's salmon runs are some of the biggest in the world, but over the past few decades, those big salmon runs have featured ever smaller salmon.
You talk to people up there who've been fishing for a long time, and they're definitely able to tell you that, we just don't see those really large, old salmon that we used to see.
Krista Oak, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Oak and colleagues at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and elsewhere analyzed records of fish size going back to the 1950s. They included data on some 12.5 million salmon, each of which had to be measured by someone from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And there's no question about it, salmon have shrunk. Sockeye salmon today are 2.1% shorter than their ancestors. Chum salmon are 2.4% shorter, and coho are 3.3% shorter. Chinook or king salmon showed the greatest declines at 8%. That's an average difference of more than 2 inches in length. The study is in the journal Nature Communications. The researchers haven't nailed down the exact reasons behind this trend, but their analysis suggests that climate change and competition with wild and hatchery-raised salmon both play a role. They also discovered that much of the change in body size is due to fish returning from the ocean at a younger age now than in the past. Oak says fish could be returning earlier because they're reaching maturity faster for some reason, or because the ocean has become a riskier place for older salmon to survive.
What could be happening is the salmon that otherwise would have returned large and old just aren't making it that long.
Whatever the cause, this size shift has massive ramifications for people and the environment. Oak and her team calculated that catching smaller fish may have already slashed the value of Alaska's commercial salmon fisheries by 21%. It's also likely reduced the food available to subsistence fishers, many of whom rely on stores of salmon to get them through the long, harsh winter, by as much as 26%. On the ecological side, the researchers estimated that smaller fish lay 16% fewer eggs, which could depress salmon populations in the future. And the salmon bring 28% fewer nutrients into the watersheds where they spawn, according to the study.
After they breed and die, their carcasses actually fertilize freshwater and terrestrial ecosystems with these marine-derived nutrients that are really important and that get used by all kinds of animals like bears and songbirds and even taken up into trees.
With no single factor to blame for shrinking salmon, there's no obvious fix, Oak says. But there are still plenty of fish in the sea. They're just smaller than they used to be. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Julia Rosen.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best test for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture. What is it and why does it matter? Created in 1862 by Abraham Lincoln to be what he called the People's Department, today this little-known agency has enormous tools and resources to restore fairness and opportunity across America's countryside. It has major anti-monopoly authority, controls huge rural development and housing programs, runs food stamps, school lunch, and other nutrition programs, has responsibility for pesticide regulations, directs the Forest Service and numerous other environmental programs, has sweeping civil and labor rights responsibilities, wields a $151 billion annual budget, has 100,000 employees, and an office in every county in America. And, most powerfully, the Secretary has broad authority to be a national advocate for the people against the corporate plutocracy now controlling policy. Ag Secretary is a big office, but tools only work if you use them. President-elect Biden rightly promised to restore trust that our national government will serve the public interest rather than continuing policies that abet oligarchic power and increase inequality. Here is a clear test of that promise. Instead of recycling another old-line agribusiness acolyte into USDA, Biden must be pushed to make a progressive choice for Secretary of Agriculture, someone unencumbered by financial or political ties to the status quo, willing to practice what Representative John Lewis called getting into good trouble, necessary trouble. This is Jim Hightower saying, at minimum, the next Secretary of Agriculture should pledge to rally family farmers, workers, consumers, rural communities, and urban neighborhoods in a common effort to break the corporate stranglehold and turn USDA into the People's Department again.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
Should people behind bars be a priority to receive the COVID-19 vaccine? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The American Medical Association says, yes, people in jail should be put near the front of the line, not the back, to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. That's because people in jail face many of the same health risks as people in long-term care facilities, who are considered a priority group. Prisoners live in crowded conditions, share bathrooms and eating facilities, and social distancing generally is impossible, which makes their odds of contracting the virus high. Inmates also have high rates of asthma, diabetes, and heart disease, which makes them particularly vulnerable. And an outbreak inside jeopardizes the larger community. Guards and other jail personnel daily come and go, and inmates make bail or complete their sentences and return home. Not surprisingly, studies prove that an outbreak inside leads to serious outbreaks outside. There will, of course, be pushback to the AMA position. Colorado Governor Jared Polis, for example, said, there's no way the vaccine goes to prisoners before it goes to people who haven't committed any crime. But from a public health point of view, if nothing else, that's a destructive position. And do remember, people inside have almost no control over whether they are exposed to COVID-19, and none have been sentenced to suffer a horrible disease or death. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1953. That was the day that Ralph Cordiner, president of General Electric, issued his Cordiner Doctrine. It was the height of McCarthyism and the Second Red Scare. The House Un-American Activities Committee persisted in its witch hunting of trade unionists, labor militants, and alleged communists. It targeted many of the unions purged from the CIO in 1949. The United Electrical Workers was one of those unions. The UE had organized the electrical manufacturing industry, including General Electric. Wisconsin Senator Joe McCarthy and HUAC each began investigating UE Local 301 at the General Electric plant in Schenectady, New York. GE didn't like the militancy of the UE or the bad publicity McCarthy generated about the company harboring subversives. So President Cordiner issued a memo which stated that any employee called before a Senate or legislative committee hearing who invoked the Fifth Amendment in response to inquiries regarding alleged communist ties shall be terminated. When McCarthy came to Albany, New York to hold hearings on alleged subversive activities 3 months later, hundreds of UE members packed the room, booing and jeering the senator and cheering the defendants. One African-American worker demanded, "Why don't you investigate subversion by GE of the Jim Crow system, of the profits taken from the sweat of my people?" McCarthy abruptly ended the hearings, but 28 UE members would be fired at General Electric. Other electrical manufacturers like Westinghouse soon followed suit. It was a devastating blow to the union and to the fired members who had helped build the UE from the ground up. But the union persevered and remains a powerful representative force for workers in the industry today. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
I'm Mark Belanger. The rise of the far right in countries such as the UK and the United States is a direct challenge to the existence of labor unions. That is why the British Trades Union Congress, the TUC, has produced a report entitled The Rise of the Far Right and Building a Trade Union Response. TUC General Secretary Frances O'Grady introduced the report during a recent webinar.
I think it's worth drawing on this report to think about what's the unique value, what's the added value that the trade union movement offers in a way that nobody else can, because we've got to be pretty hard-headed about where our priorities lie and where we can make the most difference. I would say we sometimes underestimate the importance of our convening power. The fact that we can get people into a room, the same room, in a way that nobody else can, whether that's locally, nationally, or globally. And that, I think, is critical, because if there's one thing that we've learned from our history, it's the importance of a broad front response, it's the importance of unity over division. And that requires a way of working, negotiating skills, that willingness to find a way through and find that common cause, which is, to me, at the heart of trade unionism. It's also, by the way, I think about empowering those who are targeted within our own ranks. We all know we've got a long way to go before the leadership of the trade union movement at every level looks like the new diverse working class that we represent. This is real stuff, because if we are to be a true ally, if we are to create a safe space for people to fight back, then we have got to get our own act together in terms of looking like the people we aim to represent. There's been some lovely poetry and lovely quotes used by other speakers. Mine would be James Connolly, "None so fit to break their chains than those who wear them." So, we need to do more within our own movement, I think, to empower people. And we also need to recognise that our power is rooted in the workplace. There is some fantastic reps education online, easily accessible, that the TUC and many of our unions have produced. Look at tackling the far right on the TUC website. loads of resources and online training, including special modules, but critically, how to have those one-to-one conversations in the workplace. Many of our reps, we know, need more confidence to push back against the spread of those ideas, but to do it in a way that's productive, not just finger wagging, which we know doesn't work, but actually listening and then persuading and peeling away that layer of workers who might otherwise be attracted to the far right and indeed increasingly the radical right. We've also got some fantastic initiatives, cross-border initiatives. For example, the TUC and Unite working together with our German friends, the DGB and IG Metall, to look at how we can work in multinational corporations to create workplaces that can become far-right free zones with a bastion of organised workers who are prepared to take on and combat those ideas. And of course, trade unionism doesn't stop at the workplace door. We know that. We also have an obligation to our communities, including defence of our communities, but also winning hearts and minds. And that is, again, I think, where we need to be hard-headed and learn about what works and what doesn't. So, at a very simple level, and we've tested this time and time again, we know that myth-busting doesn't work, reeling off facts and figures doesn't work, but very often simple, plain language that is inclusive to people, that's about no matter what race or religion or background you come from, everybody should have decent work.
And that's it, international labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 39 degrees Fahrenheit with cloudy conditions, and we should have a temperature near the same as yesterday, which was in the low 50s. And we're expected some sunshine later today. Winds will be light and variable. Had a bit of rain overnight, with rain picking up later on this afternoon. And lows overnight will be in the low 40s, then considerable cloudiness, occasional rain showers overnight, and all day tomorrow with highs in the low 40s, winds remaining light and variable. Confirmed coronavirus cases in Jackson County here in the southern part of Oregon have now been reduced to 4,017, and they ticked off a confirmed death, and we're now down to 37. I still maintain both are a gross undercount, but we will go with what the health department in Oregon is saying right now. Pollen right outside the window here at the mothership in Rogue River proper is rated at none. The air quality index is moderate at 64 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at 1. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.33 inches. Visibility is down to 3 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 44 and partly cloudy. Paris is 38 and cloudy. Rome is 51 and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 25 and cloudy. Kabul is 37 with its winter smoke. Hong Kong is 64 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 50 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 66 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is a crisp 37 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Some of those involved in the assassination of Iran's top nuclear scientist last month have been arrested. An advisor to the Iranian parliament speaker said yesterday, Tuesday, Iran has blamed Israel for the November 27 killing of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, who was seen by Western intelligence services as the mastermind of a covert Iranian nuclear weapons program. Tehran has long denied any such ambition. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied responsibility for the killing. The perpetrators of this assassination, some of whom have been identified and even arrested by the security services, will not escape justice. The semi-official news agency ISNA quoted advisor Hossein Amir Abdollahian as telling Iran's Arabic language Al-Alam TV. Iran has given contradictory details of the scientist's death in a daytime November 27th ambush on his car on a highway near the capital Tehran. A senior Revolutionary Guards commander has said the killing was carried out remotely with artificial intelligence and a machine gun equipped with a satellite-controlled smart system. Yet, witnesses told state television that a truck had exploded before a group of gunmen fired on the scientist's car.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mais automne, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Vladimir Putin signed a law allowing Russia's national legislation precedence over international treaties and rulings from international bodies in cases when they conflict with the Russian Constitution. And what does the Russian Constitution say? Whatever Vlad says it says. The Kremlin has said that all Russia's obligations under international treaties remain in force and that Moscow remains fully committed to international law until they aren't. But the legislation has caused concern among some rights advocates in Russia, where hundreds of people appeal to the European Court of Human Rights every year, seeking justice that they say have been denied at home by Vlad. Putin first proposed the reform during a State of the Nation address in January. It is one of an array of legal and constitutional amendments adopted this year, including one allowing Putin to run again for president 2 more times when his current term comes to an end in 2024. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.